I'm stringing a Prince O3 tennis racket, and I've just replaced the grommets, and I'm stringing it with Kevlar strings. One problem with Kevlar strings is they're very, very flimsy. Although they play very stiff and don't stretch, the string itself is very flimsy. If I was to pull tension now on this 7th main on either side, I'll pretty much block this hole, especially because it's a new grommet, but this string comes in on the inside of that hole there, and it comes out on the outside, so it pretty much blocks the hole going all the way across right in the center. So that leaves about a quarter of a hole above the string and a quarter of a hole below the string to get this string back in there. So what I'm going to do is, before I pull tension on that string, is I'm going to put this Kevlar string through there. I've just got it started. Now I can go on and safely pull tension on this string. Now my problem is I've got a small loop of string down here at the bottom, and I can't get this loop of string into my gripper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little piece of scrap string and put it into my starting clamp. And that's going to give me a little bit of extra length, because I'm going to use this starting clamp as a bridge on this string. So I put my starting clamp on the string that I'm trying to tension. I put my scrap string in the tensioner, and I pull tension on that string. Alright, now that I've got that side started, I'm going to switch back over to this side and do the same thing. Really, the reason I'm switching is because I don't like to string more than one string ahead at any one time, and I was one string ahead on that side, so now I'm coming back over to this side doing the same thing to get it evened up on this side. Put my starting clamp on, and I'll pull tension. Tension on this string on the last main here. Then I can go on and tie this string off. Then I want to do the same thing on this side. When I start my crosses now, I'm going to go above the bridge on this side here and string my crosses for the top side. Then when I go on the other side, I'm going to go below that bridge, and this string I have to start opposite from that one. So if I went under the string right here, I'll go over this string this time. So it's a little bit different than the way you normally string a racket, because what I like to do is go over the first string and under the last string when I'm stringing my crosses, and I'm talking about going over and under the mains when I do that. But when you do a two-piece 50-50, you're going to have to do it both ways. You're going to have to start going under for one half, and then whichever way you started, you'll do the opposite way on the other half. Now that I've got the two strings in, I'm going to pull tension on both of these strings. Okay, I'm going to clamp as far away from the tension head as I can on the bottom string. And I'm also going to put a starting clamp on that same bottom string. The starting clamp still got my scrap string on there, so let me throw that away. Okay, I can release tension, then pull tension on the top string. When I do it this way now, this string is laying in the O-port just the way it needs to be laying in that O-port, so that I don't need any tools to do this with. Now what I've done is I've got full tension on this top string, but only half tension on the bottom string, because the bottom string I clamped with the starting clamp when I was pulling both the strings. So before I move this clamp, I have to re-pull the bottom cross and then put this clamp back up against the frame so that I'm keeping full tension on this string. Now I'm going to go on and continue weaving my crosses all the way up to the top. Let me show you a little trick here for checking for misweaves. This string right here is tensioned and clamped off. This string right here is the next string that I'm going to tension. You'll notice as it goes over the high strings and under the low strings, you'll have little peaks and valleys all the way across here. This next string is a string that I've got ran in there that is one ahead, just so that I can go under the high strings and over the low strings and string it straight across there and make it a lot easier. So it also cuts down on friction. But when I pull tension on this string, if you look at this, the string I'm going to tension with all the peaks and valleys, as soon as I pull tension, that'll lay flat, and this string will get all those peaks and valleys in it. Okay, now this string's flat, and here's all my peaks and valleys. If you're looking for that when you're stringing your tennis racket, then you'll end up having a lot fewer misweaves. Okay, I'm getting ready to pull tension on my last cross before I get out of my O-ports and into my standard grommets. And I'm going to show you what's going to happen when I pull tension on that string. One thing you'll notice is I'm not using any boomerang tools, and I'm not using any spacers to hold this racket in the right place. I'm not using my brake. The racket is free to turn. But even though I'm in this O-port right here, the string is lying in the correct position, so I don't need any of those tools. And it's all because I'm doing a two-piece 50-50. Okay, I've ran in all my crosses now, and I've taken my top cross and I'm holding it with another starting clamp. I've got two starting clamps and they all come in handy. I wish I had another one. I'll probably get another one someday. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this clamp down to here, my next bottom cross. So I'm clamping this string. I've taken my starting clamp off. I'm going to leave this starting clamp on that top string until I tie off my bottom string, and the reason I do that is because I think I have a stiffer string bed and I get less drawback that way. Now on the top half of the racket I was going under the first main and over the last. Now I'm going to have to go over this string because this is my last main the last time, and weave my tennis racket in the lower half of the racket. It's exactly opposite what I did in the top half of the racket, because I'm working from the inside of the racket to the bottom and to the top. Okay, there's my first string. I've got all my peaks and valleys in there. Now I'm going to string my one ahead, and this string should be straight going across through there, or fairly straight. It's not really straight, I wouldn't guess. I'll pull tension on this one and watch all my peaks and valleys go away. I also like to try to keep my string straight as I'm working through the racket. That way I think it holds the tension a little bit better in the tennis racket. If you wait till you get done to straighten up all your strings, you're just going to be losing a little bit of tension. I've got all my peaks and valleys again. I always look for that every time I start weaving across. If I ever do have any misweaves, I can get them corrected before I tie off my knots, before it gets too far. Before I run or put this bottom cross in all the way, I want to show you something. I normally tie all my knots on the top of the racket. So my last string, I try to get it so that I'm not coming out of a grommet hole right here, going over a string on the outside of the racket and going into a grommet hole up here. So what I'm going to try to do is because I tie my knots on the top side of the racket, I'm going to try to come out on the top side of this hole right here with this string and go in on the top side of this hole right here. To do that, I've got my string cut at a point, as you can see right there, and the thinner side is on the top of this string. So that's the way I'm going to insert it into this grommet hole, in hopes that I can get it to come out on the top. If it doesn't come out on the top, then I'll try it again. Came out on the top the first time, so I've got no problem. Okay, another thing too is this grommet hole is actually pretty tight, so I can't take an awl and stick it in there, because as you can see there are no grommets. It's actually just a hole in the frame. Because this grommet hole, actually the hole in the frame, is pretty tight, I'm going to take that same point and turn it up again, and I'm going to use my long nose pliers this time and try to get that string in on the top half of that hole, and worked out fine for me. Now that I've got that in there, I'm going to pull tension on this bottom cross, and I'll tie it off. I use a pro knot in just about all my knots. I think it holds just as good as the Parnell. It's not quite as big, but it's basically the same knot as a Parnell knot. I've been using it now for about 30 years, so I figured, what the heck, I switch. Now I'm going to take off this starting clamp on top, and tie off my top cross. Again, now I've got the same problem here, where I need to make sure that I'm getting this string laid in there right, so I don't have any overlaps. This one came out the bottom. I wasn't really paying that much attention to it, so I'm going to try to get this string in on the bottom. Okay. I'll tie this one off, cut off my tails, do a last little bit of straightening on my strings, label my racket, and I'm all done.